Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Seven Lights production of From Superman to Man, based on the novel by J.A. Rogers.
The notion of superior and inferior people spread like wildfire through Germany. German literature, philosophy, and politics were profoundly influenced by it.
Is this Boone we're coming into, Porter?
No, sir. We're not being Boone for 20 minutes yet. This is Ames.
Oh, thank goodness. The porter in my car had gone to bed, and I was afraid it passed me by. Would you mind if I rode with you and ride with you and get off when we get there?
Oh, make yourself at home.
Thank you.
Where are your grips?
Thank you. I took the liberty to look at this. I hope you don't mind. I find this is an old favorite of mine.
Ah, is it?
Yes, this is the first English translation I've seen, and it's quite remarkable.
Yes, sir. Very good. But I prefer it in the original. Vous parlez français alors? Mais oui, monsieur.
Where did you learn French? In New Orleans?
I began it in college and learned it in France.
You have been to France? What part?
Bordeaux.
Bordeaux. How long?
2.5 years.
Studying?
No, sir. I was a Spanish correspondent to Simon & Company, wine merchants.
You speak Spanish too? What are you, Cuban?
No, American, but I have been to Cuba. I learned Spanish in the Philippines.
Well, you have traveled a great deal.
Yes, sir. It's just my luck. I returned from the Philippines in time to get a job as a valet to a gentleman about to tour the southern part of South America. 6 months later, I became his private secretary. Together, we visited the principal countries of the world. Mr. Simpson died while we were in Bordeaux. That accounts for my stay there.
Well, didn't you like it in France?
Oh, I liked it better than any place on earth, but along came the World War, and I joined up with the American forces. After the war, with my job gone, I came back with the boys to America. Here I am.
Well, if you don't mind my saying, with your knowledge of French and Spanish, you ought to be able to get a better job than this.
Well, I've never been able to. When one has a family, he has to find the wherewithal to live some way.
But have you tried to find something better?
I'm trying continuously. Upon my return from Europe, I advertised as a French and Spanish correspondent. I received many replies, but when the employers saw me, they made various excuses. One declaring he was broad-minded would have, but his offer was so small, I declined it on principle.
Oh. You say you went to college. Do you mind coming a little closer? I can't hear from the noise.
Yes, I spent a semester and a half at Yale, and then along came the chance of the travel opportunities that I spoke of.
So what do you think of railroad life?
Oh, the variety of people is quite fascinating.
Yes, I know what you mean. The porter in my car earlier, he had a run-in with, well, quite an indignant passenger. Although the poor porter meant no harm, and he tried incessantly to apologize, though he'd done nothing wrong, the passenger would not let it go. He insisted that the porter be fired and put off the train immediately.
I'm not surprised.
Do you often meet people like that?
No, sir. Nearly everyone I meet on the road is very pleasant. I'm sure if that wise old Greek who said most men are bad had gained his knowledge of human nature on a sleeping car, his verdict would have been altogether different. One meets a grouch at such rare intervals that he can afford to be liberal then. I can recall a story similar to the one you just told me. Would you care to hear it?
Oh, absolutely.
One day while waiting on a drawing room passenger, I made a mistake. Now this man who had gotten on the train with such a grouch, having previously wrangled with the train and sleeping car conductors, at once began to abuse me vociferously in spite of my earnest apology. I took it all politely, at the same time racking my mind for some polite but effective retort. As I noticed the ludicrousness of his ruffled features, an inspiration came to me whereby I could bring his conduct effectively to his notice. In the room was a full-length mirror made into the stateroom door. Swinging this door around where he could get a full view of his distorted features and saying with a good nature, "See, sir, the mirror does you a strange injustice today." The ridicule was too much for him. He stopped immediately. Then he started to explode again. Then, apparently at a loss for words, he sat down. He later proved to be one of the finest passengers I've ever seen.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Now, about that book, I remember the great stir it created when it first appeared. Well, Fanon has rendered a great service to humanity. He well deserves the honor bestowed upon him. Officer of the Legion of Honors.
Yes, he has been rightly called one of the makers of modern France. We're coming into Boone now, sir.
I see. Well, this has been I'm sorry our acquaintance is so short. I'm stopping here only for the night. We'll be heading on to Los Angeles in the morning. It's a shame, really. Would have been nice to have you all the way.
I'm sure you'll have a pleasant porter tomorrow. Good day, sir.
Goodbye, my friend.
The doctrine of inequality is emphatically a science of European white people. It is they who have invented it. The Germans of 1854 built up a theory of the inferiority of the other people of the white race. Some of these so-called inferior whites have, in turn, built up a similar theory about the darker people.
I recall so many falsities about my own original black people. In nearly all of the large libraries in the United States, those I've been permitted to enter, I found all sorts of books advancing theories to prove that the original people were inferior. I hear so many conversations on these cars or in other places about what I call the heirloom ideas. That is, the ideas that people have of different varieties of the human race. Now, this discussion has done me good, as it has been a means of acquiring a fund of knowledge, and it has caused me to look up those opinions that I thought inaccurate in the works of the standard scientist.
In conclusion, this doctrine of racial superiority apparently incited the other European people, most of whom were enemies to one another, to unite against the Germans in 1914. Will the doctrine of white superiority over the darker races produce a similar result to the white empire?
The nigger is a menace to the white man's civilization and should be kept down. And I'm opposed to educating him, for the educated nigger is a misfit in the white man's civilization. He's a caricature. No good can come from his buttoning on our affairs. Now, that's the proper place for a nigger.
My God, man.
Oh, you may say what you please, but I could never eat with a nigger. I couldn't stand it. Well, thank you, George. God has placed an insuperable barrier between black and white that will prevent the two from ever living on the same social plane as far as the Anglo-Saxon is concerned. I have no hatred for the black man. In fact, I could have none. But he must stay in his place. I'm a senator from the great state of Oklahoma, for crying out loud.
That's nothing but racial antipathy, Senator.
Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Didn't Abraham Lincoln say there is a physical difference between the white and black races which, I believe, will forbid the two races ever living together on terms of social and political equality? You may call it what you please, but there's an indefinable something within me that tells me that I'm better than the best nigger that ever lived. The feeling is instinctive, and I'm not going to violate nature.
I could define that undefinable feeling of superiority. It's not only towards Negroes, it's towards his white associates as well. Even he would call it conceit in anyone else.
You too had slavery in the North, and when you couldn't make any more money on it, you gave it up. Wasn't it your pedantic and self-righteous Massachusetts the first to legalize slavery?
I grew up outside of Baltimore.
You Northerners forced slavery on us. And when you couldn't make any more money on it because England had stopped the slave trade, you made more on us to make us give it up. Better climate, that's all. climate's reversed, and it would have been the South that wanted abolition. It was a matter of climate with you, not sentiment at all.
Did you read in the paper this morning about
Oh, don't change the subject. You Northerners who had an interest in slavery were bitterly opposed to abolition. It is all very well for you to talk, but if you Yankees had the same percentage of niggas that we have, you would sing a different tune. It's the Northerners who have come south that are the bitterest people against the nigga. You too had race riots, lynching, segregation. The only difference between the South and the North is that one is frank and the other is hypocritical. And I hate hypocrisy.
May I light that for you, sir?
The dining car is now open and dinner is now being served.
No, boy, I never smoked for you.
Right this way, sir. Right this way.
Oh, yeah. All right, George.
Oh, that fellow's obsessed by the race problem. I met him yesterday at the hotel, and he's talked hardly anything else since. This morning in the elevator, Negro looked like a well-dressed man, a businessman, came in, and at once he began to tell me so that all could hear him something about a nigger doctor in Oklahoma. You only could see how ridiculous he is. He'd shut up.
Oh, don't you worry none, sir. We see that kind of thing all the time.
It's very kind of you, sir, but I take no offense to his disposition.
That guy doesn't like niggers, huh? I wager his instinctive dislike, as he calls it, doesn't include both sexes of your race.
You're probably right.
I know his kind well.
Let me get that for you, sir. Oh, yeah. Excuse me. Thank you kindly. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
We must exercise patience with the self-deluded. Can't sleep, sir?
No, George. I was awakened at the last stop, and I couldn't go back to sleep. I never do very well on the first night out anyway. You know, soon the state of Oklahoma and all that.
Yes, quite.
Reminds me of a joke. Oh, no, thank you. No, that reminds me of a joke. You ever hear the joke about the chicken stealing nigger?
Indeed, quite.
Oh. Well, how about the razor fighting coon? Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir, indeed.
Well, how about the Negroes in the watermelon feast?
Well, of course.
Here's a good one. A Negro waiter in a northern hotel was asked by a southern guest if he was the head nigger. Well, right away, he grew indignant. Well, said the guest, I was only asking because I have a rather large tip for the head nigger. The nigger says, yes, boss, I was the head nigger. You don't believe me? Ask all them other niggas then.
The idea of some people at being courteous and setting others at their ease is so crude that it enters the realm of high comedy.
Passenger for Des Moines, Iowa. Des Moines, Iowa, and all transfer points south and east.
Beg your pardon, may I be excused?
Sir. From its size and binding, it might contain some serious thought. Does it? Somehow I believe that this Negro is above the ordinary. This book seems to confirm my suspicions. Plus, there's a certain false quality in the timbre of his laugh and the merry twinkle in his eye. Why do I feel uncomfortable? Reading the Bible, George?
No, sir.
Well, what then? Scientific work? Pretty deep stuff, huh? Who's the author? Thank you. Nonsense. Ridiculous. Just as I thought, written by a Frenchman. You believe in all this rot about about the equality of the races.
May I remind you, sir, that I'm here in a domestic capacity? My personal policy is to avoid any topic of discussion that may result in a difference of opinion with a passenger, provided it did not entail any sacrifice of my dignity or self-respect. I'm only here to give you a most pleasurable travel experience. See, I remember a remark made by this passenger this afternoon that the Jew, the Dago, the Frenchman, and the Spaniard, they're all niggers to a greater or lesser extent. The only white people are the Teuton, the Anglo-Saxon, and the Scandinavian. Perhaps there is a way that I can retain my own opinion and yet be in apparent accord with this passenger. No, sir, I do not believe in the equality of the races. As you say, it is impossible.
Riders of this type do not know what they are talking about. They ride for mere theory. If they had to live among niggers, they would sing an entirely different tune.
Yet, sir, Monsieur Fenel has proven his point quite admirably. I'm sure if you were to read this book, you would agree with him.
Did you just not say that you didn't agree with this book?
I fear you misunderstood me, sir.
Did you not say that you did not believe in the equality of the races?
Yes, sir.
Then why?
Because, as you said, sir, it's impossible.
Well, why? Why the hell is that?
Because there is but one race, the human race.
I do not like educated niggers, and I do not intend to engage in a controversy with this one. However, what is better of the two courses of action? Silence or a response? If I say nothing, this nigga might think he had silenced me. While to respond would be to engage in an argument and thus treating this nigga as an equal. You say that there's only one race. Well, what do you call yourself?
An American citizen.
Do you believe that the nigga is the equal of the Anglo-Saxon race?
I've read many books on anthropology, sir. I've yet to see mention of either a nigger race or an Anglo-Saxon one.
Perhaps you have never heard of the word nigger.
Couldn't help it, sir.
All right, but you didn't answer my question. Do you believe that your race, the black race, will ever attain the intellectual standard of the Caucasian?
What good would it do to argue with a man so seemingly rooted in his prejudices? Now, since a single finger upon a supported bar of steel 3 inches thick yields ever so slightly, since every action produces an effect, surely if I advance my views in a kindly manner, I will modify the error in this man. But this is no layman. This is a legislator, one who above all others ought to know the truth. But I must be mindful to restrict any topic of conversation of the human race as a whole. And above all, I must steer clear of the color question in the United States. I have found, sir, that any division of humanity based purely on physique to be other than purely nominal is inconsequential, because differences in physique are caused by climatic conditions and thus are subject to change by them. As you know, both science and the Bible are agreed that all so-called races came from a single source. Pigmented humanity becomes lighter in the temperature zone. Unpigmented humanity becomes darker in the tropics. One summer's exposure to a bathing beach is enough to make white skin darker than many Indians. The true skin of all human beings is of the same color. All men are white under the first layer.
And you believe that? Is that what you niggas believe?
Again, sir, scientists have never been able to classify human varieties. Huxley, as you know, named 2, Blumenbach 5, Burke 63, while others desiring greater accuracy have named hundreds. Now, since these classifications are so vague and changeable, it is evident, is it not, sir, that any division of humanity based on color of skin, texture of hair, or facial contour to have other than a merely nominal value must be one of mentality And to classify humanity by intellect, which as you know, would be an impossible task. Nature, so far as we know, made only the individual.
But you have not answered my question. Do you believe that the Negro will ever attain the high intellectual standard of the Caucasian? Yes or no?
Well, intellect, whether of civilized or uncivilized humanity, is elastic in quality. That is, primitive man, when transplanted to civilization, not only becomes civilized, but sometimes excels some of those whose ancestors have had centuries of culture. Likewise, the child of civilized man, when isolated among primitives, becomes one himself. We would find that the differences between a people who had acquired, say, 3 or 4 generations of beneficent culture would be about the same as that of a people long civilized.
But you still haven't answered my question. Do you believe that your race, the Negro race, will ever achieve the standards of the Caucasian race?
Likewise, the child of civilized man, when isolated among primitives, becomes one himself. We would find that the differences of a people who had acquired, say, 3 or 4 generations of beneficent culture would be about the same as that of a people who had long been civilized. It does appear, sir, that by the light of modern research that the white-skinned humanity got its civilization from the dark-skinned variety, and even its very origin.
But you have not answered the question. Do you believe that the black race, your race, will achieve the accomplishments, the intellectual standards, the breeding, the culture of the Caucasian? Yes or no?
For the most authoritative answer, we must look to modern scientists. If you don't mind, I'll give you a few quotations of scientists of acknowledged authority, all of your own race.
Opinions, mere opinions. I asked you what you believe, and you're telling me what somebody else said. I asked you, what do you think?
Each of us, however learned, however independent, is compelled to seek the advice of someone else on some particular subject at some time. The doctors and the other professions. Now, in seeking advice, one usually places the most reliance on those one considers experts, is it not? This afternoon, I overheard you quoting from one of Lincoln's debates with Douglas in order to prove your point of view. In 1911, the most leading sociologist and anthropologist of the world met in a Universal Races Congress in London. The opinion of that Congress was that all so-called races of men are essentially equal. Gustav Spiller, its organizer and secretary, voiced the findings of that entire body of experts when, after a careful weighing of the question of superiority and inferiority, he said, "We are then under the necessity of concluding that an impartial investigator would be inclined to look upon the various important people of the world as to all intents and purposes essentially equal in intellect, enterprise, morality, and physique. For no, whose findings ought to be regarded as more valuable than the expressions of those who base their arguments on sentiment or Hebrew mythology, says, all people may attain this distant frontier which the brains of the white have reached."
Oh, that's all Lord of the Flies nonsense. Is it not true that of the Negro that while the white, the red, and the yellow races have or have had civilizations of their own, the black has had absolutely none? All he's ever accomplished is when driven by the whites. Indigenous to a continent of the greatest natural resources, he has all these ages produced absolutely nothing. Geographical position had nothing to do with it, or we would have not had Aztec civilization. Tell me, has the Negro race ever produced a Julius Caesar, a Shakespeare, Montezuma, a Buddha, Confucius? The Negro race and all the Negroid races are inherently inferior. A black skin has ever been a livery of servitude. God made black to serve white. He placed a curse on all the sons of Ham, and black shall ever serve the white.
The belief that the history of the black man began with his slavery in the New World, while popular, is highly erroneous. The black man, like the Aztec, was civilized when the dominant branch of the Caucasian variety was still a Caucasus Mountain cave savage. You will remember that Herodotus, the father of history and eyewitness, distinctly mentions the black skin and the woolly hair of the ancient Egyptians of his day. In Book 2, Chapter 104 of his history, he says, "I believe the Colchians are a colony of Egyptians because, like them, they have black skin and woolly hair."
No, poppycock.
No, wasn't it Aristotle in his Physiognomy, Chapter 6, who distinctly mentions the Ethiopians as having woolly hair and the Egyptians as being black skinned? And Count M.C. de Volnay, the author of The Ruins of the Empire, says that, "I believe that the Egyptians are Negroes of the tame species as the other natives present in Africa." I mean, one glance at the Sphinx or any of the other ancient Egyptian statues in the British Museum will confirm that statement. When I saw the statue of Amnefet III, I was immediately struck to the facial resemblance of Jack Johnson. I've known Negroes here and in Africa who bore a striking resemblance to Seti the Great. The latter was worshipped as the great god Amen, on whose name good white Christians still call.
What about the Negroes' low to base position on the scale of civilization? There are still millions of Negroes in Africa, little better than gorillas. They sell their own flesh and blood, they're eating human flesh and carrying on that horrible voodoo. All of the white race is civilized, and all the other races to some extent. Look at the incomprehensible achievements of the white man. Look at the busy cities, the magnificent edifices, the railroads, the wireless telegraph, the radio, the ships of the air. Consider the marvels of science. What has the white man not done? He has weighed the atom and the star with perfect accuracy. He has competed with lightning for speed and equaled it. He has challenged the eagle of the air and outstripped him. He has probed the uttermost recesses of infinity and fathomed the deepest mysteries of the ocean. What has the white man not done? Really, in the face of these facts, these patents are the most credulous. You mean to tell me that you are the equal of the breed of Superman and Wonder Women that I represent? This childlike credulity, it defies reasoning. More than ever do I perceive a Negro is incapable of reasoning.
The white man's civilization is merely a continuation of that which was passed on to him by the Negro, who simply retrogressed. Civilizations, as Spillers pointed out, are meteoric, bursting out of obscurity only to plunge back again. Macedonia, for example. Of the early history of man, we know nothing definite. Prior even to Paleolithic man, there may have been civilizations excelling even our own. In the heart of Africa, explorers may yet unearth marks of ancient Negro civilizations similar to the fashion of Assyria, which was forgotten for 2,000 years and finally discovered by accident under 40 feet of earth. Since then, the tombs of 14 kings and 55 queens have been unearthed by the Reisner expedition. Among them was that of King Turquois, mentioned in the book of Isaiah. Again, great Negro civilizations flourished even in the Middle Ages, such as Timbuktu. And then there have been such purely Negro civilizations as Songhai and Uganda, which were of high rank. 1900 years ago, England was inhabited by savages. You may be sure that the Roman had the same contempt for the savages of the north who conquered him and almost obliterated his society. But these undeveloped people should not be despised. Nature, it certainly seems, does not intend to have the entire world civilized at the same time. Fanon says that many biologists regard the Caucasian as having reached the limit of his evolution and that he can go no higher without damage to his overdeveloped brain. Underdeveloped people, sir, like undeveloped resources, are simply nature's bank account.
You said you were born in Alabama?
Yes, sir.
Your grandfather was a slave, wasn't he?
My grandmother, sir.
Well, what I want to get at is this. Do you, a black man, the descendant of slaves, feel that you are equal of a white man who has always been free and had owned your people as chattels? Come on now. I don't want to hear any more of your theories.
Of course, sir, this is a matter that deeply concerns our country and humanity.
Oh, come on, man!
And so I feel that we too can speak on it calmly and without any ill feelings. Reared as I was in a part of the South where white skin was deified and a black one vilified, candidly in my childhood, I did believe that there was something about the white man that made him superior to me. But fortunately for me, I've read and traveled considerably. I once worked for a Mr. Simpson, and while with him, I visited the principal countries of the world. In one English town where I lived for 6 months, I didn't see another dark face. Living exclusively among the whites as I was, I noticed that except for differences due entirely to environment, my people were essentially the same as whites. Indeed, what struck me in my travels was the universality of human nature. European-reared Negroes, so far as I could discern, had the same manner and temperament, class for class, as the whites. Then, too, my position on this train has afforded me the opportunity for continued observation. I've met white people in all kinds of relationships, and if there are any inherent differences between the Negro and the Caucasian, I've yet to find them after 30 years of rather careful observation. You may be sure, sir, that my ideas of superiority based on lack of pigmentation or texture of hair evaporated long ago.
But what about slavery? Isn't that a sign of Negro inferiority? Look up the word Negro in any dictionary and you will find it is synonymous with slave. A black skin has ever been a livery of servitude. Isn't this age-old slavery a sign of the Negro's inferiority?
Strange as it may seem, sir, the white race has never really been free. Even today, their vast majority of its members are industrially the serfs and mentally the slaves of the few. But if we are to accept this term literally, all or nearly all branches of white-skinned humanity have been slaves that could be bought and sold. The Britons were slaves to the Romans. Cicero, in writing to his friend Atticus, said the stupidest and ugliest slaves come from Rome. Later, they were the slaves to the Normans. In the 16th century, the Anglo-Saxon slave was entirely the property of his master, body as well as labor. Like the Negro, he ranked in value and use with the beast of the plow. Certain classes of Anglo-Saxon slaves were not even permitted to buy their freedom, since it was contended that they were entirely the property of their master. Serfdom wasn't abolished in Prussia until 1807, and in Austria until 1848. There were white slaves in America. There were Irish slaves in New England.
Irish slaves in New England?
Yes, sir. Irish men and women were bought and sold just like blacks and treated not a whit better. Many of the most socially prominent ones in America have slave ancestors. Lincoln's ancestors were slaves. There were Professor Seagrant. He says that Grover Cleveland's great-grandfather was an Irish slave in Connecticut. There were white slaves in Virginia. White and black slaves used to work the fields together in Barbados. And that reminds me, the word slave has a white origin.
A white origin?
Yes, sir. It comes from the word Slav, a very white people who were reduced to slavery by the Germans.
Never heard of that.
Nevertheless, you'll find it in the Century or any other standard dictionary. And as for Africa, whites were held slaves there for centuries. Read, for instance, the works of Abbe Bousnet, who visited Morocco in the 17th century. As late as 1815, white Americans were captured on the high seas and taken into the Sudan by blacks. You may remember that President Madison sent Commodore Decatur there and others to rescue them. You'll find several books in the Congressional Library written by these white American slaves who've been freed.
The shores of Tripoli and all that.
And I could say much about how Negroes bought whites as slaves in this country as late as 1818, but for the honor of the Negro, I think the less said of that, the better. The slaveholder, black or white, was an odious creature. At least he is in the 20th century eyes. He was either a kidnapper or better to kidnapping. My own people had owned slaves. I certainly wouldn't broadcast it. Slaveholders were parasites of the most pernicious kind. If there's any stigma placed on slavery today, it should not be placed on the descendants of slaves, but those of the slaveholder. 1900 years ago, England was inhabited by savages. You may be sure that the Romans had the same contempt for the savages of the north, who conquered him and almost obliterated his society. These undeveloped people should not be despised. Nature, it certainly seems, does not intend to have the whole world civilized at the same time.
Now, what about this then? The Negro acknowledges his inferiority into the point of straightening his hair and bleaching his skin and using other devices to appear like a white man. Do you see any other races imitating the look of the white man this way? I can't imagine a more comical sight than that of a Negro dandy with his hair all straightened out and ironed like it appears like the quills upon the fretful porcupine. Now, isn't imitation a sure sign of superiority? You don't find white people darkening themselves to look like Negroes. If the Negro feels that he is the equal of the white man, his actions certainly do not show it.
It's true, sir, that these Negroes who doctor themselves in an attempt to appear white do acknowledge inferiority. I've always held that one's hair and color are as perfect as nature could possibly make them, so perfect that to tamper with either is the surest way of defiling oneself, even your future generations. Indeed, sir, it is clearly the fault of the average white that these so-called Negroes would try to appear to be other than they are. In a country where a drop of Negro blood, more or less visible, and a kink in the hair, more or less pronounced, can altogether change the current of one's life, what would you expect? Madam Walker, it is said, made $1 million by straightening the hair of Negroes. Marcel made 20 times that, reversing the process among the whites. And the whites also, by bleaching their skin and their hair and wearing false hair and the like, not to mention their use of suntan lotions, they make a false show too, don't they? Whose superiority then are they aping?
Well, you know, the Negro shows no originality. Not insofar, even as contemptuous epithets are concerned. The white man calls the Negro nigger, and the Negro accepts it, even to the point of calling himself so. Fancy a white man giving himself a name given to him by Negroes.
Yes, a good number of uneducated Negroes, and some with mere book learning, do act in a manner to warrant your statement. The habit that far too many Negroes have of calling themselves by these objectionable epithets given to them by their contemnors cannot be too strongly condemned. Yet, isn't the surest way of nullifying a nickname is to call yourself by it? Anyway, I've been to South America, and the Negroes there, they would never think of addressing one another thus. Indeed, even a full-blooded Brazilian Negro would be hurt if called a Negro, in much the same way a descendant of the Pilgrim Fathers would be if called an Englishman. They wish to be known only by their national patronymic.
Because he's ashamed of his race.
No, not necessarily. The inhabitants of Europe, they don't think of themselves as white men, but as Germans, Frenchmen, etc. And in Brazil, where slavery existed until 1888, the Negro is taught to think of himself not only as being equal to the white man, but he's given every opportunity to prove it. There's no walk of Brazilian life, official or unofficial, in which he's not participated. At least 2 Brazilian presidents have been of Negro descent. But in the United States, on the other hand, it appears that everything is done to humble the Negro, to keep down his self-respect. There ought to be little wonder then that far too many Negroes show sufficient manly dignity. Others, without weighing the support, try to appear white, an act that, after all, somewhat parallels the white man who blisters himself in the sun to appear like the bronzed heroes of the storybooks.
This is one exceptional Negro, very different from the concept of that race. He's almost like me. What are you saying? I will not permit myself to be outwitted by an inferior, in spite of this inferior's apparent intelligence. I will outface him and awe him with my racial prestige. So you believe then that you are the equal of a white man, that you are as good as a white man?
In what particular, sir?
Oh, you know very well what I mean. Do you mean to tell me that you, a black man, feel that you are as good as a white man, that you are as good as a white man? Yes or no?
Your question has answered itself, sir.
In what way?
Well, if I could tell how a white man feels, which I would have to do to make the comparison, then it would mean that I, a Negro, have the same feelings as a white man. Since, as your question implies, I would have to use the good in me as a standard by which to measure the good in any white man, then I believe that any man who, like myself, is endeavoring to do the right thing for the right reason is as good a man as I. And more, sir, your question has been most uncomplimentary to yourself. For in asking me if I consider myself as good as a white man, you are assuming that all white men, irrespective of status, reputation, or intention, are the same.
Well,
you know, Darwin, in his Descent of Man, said that the Negro boys on the eastern coast of Africa, upon seeing Burton the explorer, they cried out, "Look at that white man! Does he not look like a white ape?" And Winwood Reade says that the Negroes on the western coast prefer a blacker skin to one with a lighter tint. Agbebe, a West African scientist, says in his paper to the Universal Racist Congress, the unsophisticated African entertains an aversion to white people, and when accidentally or unexpectedly meeting a white man, he turns or takes to his heels. It is because he feels that he has come upon some unusual or unearthly creature, some hobgoblin or ghost or spirit, and then an aquiline nose, scant lips, and cat-like eyes afflict him. Dan Crawford, the famous African missionary, tells of an incident in Central Africa where a group of Negro women, upon seeing a white man for the first time, nearly broke down a doorway in their frantic haste to escape. And the Yoruba word for white man is not very flattering. It means peeled man. Stanley, the explorer, upon his return from the wilds of Africa, said that he found the complexions of Europeans ghastly after gazing so long on rich black and richer bronze.
Everything okay here at Dixon?
Yes, sir.
Very well. Senator, nice to see you. Dixon will be going into Denver in the morning, picking up a bunch of new passengers. Better get some sleep.
I will, sir. Thank you.
but your race loses valuable time in protesting that it could use to better its condition. Then all the other races get ahead of the Negro. Look at the Italians and the Polacks and all the others.
Your analogy isn't fair, sir.
Can't see why.
All of those people are white. So no matter how hard the first generation finds its hardships due almost entirely to its own deficiencies, the second one or so can blend in with the rest of the whites. The Negro, however, is treated as a separate entity. Each succeeding generation will become more progressively assertive of its manhood. I repeat, the only thing the group lacks is training and opportunity.
No, but no amount of training will ever make him anything else but a Negro. I mean, he's simply incapable of governing himself. I mean, who evolved the white man's government for him? Now, look at what a failure Liberia has been amidst the wealth of the vast African continent. Look at what a farce Haiti is. There's never been a successful government by Negroes, and there never will be one. I'd give you $100 just to name a single one.
As you mentioned, sir, the white man's government has been an evolution, the nucleus of which was passed on to him by a darker-skinned people, some of who have passed on with time. So let's look at the British government, undoubtedly the most stable and best functioning one today. Well, the Britons, after 464 years of Roman rule, lapsed into barbarism when Rome left them to govern themselves. And as regards Liberia, think what would have happened to Virginia or New England if they had received as little support from the motherland as Liberia has had.
But Mexico and Haiti had the examples of the well-governed countries to go by.
Well, in the same sense, so had the English. But it wasn't until the reign of Edward III that they began to have a settled government. And it took infusion after infusion of superior civilizations, Saxons, Danes, Normans, Gascons, to make that government. It wasn't until the beginning of Victoria's reign that the British government was firmly established, fully 2,000 years after the landing of Julius Caesar. And apart from old Egypt, there have been several successful governments, such as Timbuktu and Songhai. And what about Uganda, which has thrived for more than 5 centuries?
You've made a good point.
Why don't you give me your hand?
Okay.
Thank you.
God damn it! Why did I start to debate with this menial? The idea of a nigger, a common porter possessing enough knowledge to beat me in an argument? And he has the nerve to be so calm and polished. I'm a Caucasian and a United States Senator. Worst of all, the logic of this porter's arguments are backed up by such an array of authorities of my own race. And what the hell is a universal racist Congress? And how can I not know of something so important? And I know so little of the science of anthropology. Immorality, sexuality, and odor. I hate the whole nigger race more than ever. But after all, there is some consolation. This man was only a Negro porter, and no matter how much knowledge he possesses, I'm a white man who is the better of the two. No matter what the real truth was, the world recognized me as the better man. I have the power, and a nigger none. Now I can enter places where that nigger dared not, except as a menial.
Damn, he's an exceptional fella.
Oh, come on, man. Right this way. That's right. Come on, right this way. Oh, yeah, we'll be fine. Absolutely. Let me get that coat for you. Oh, thank you. No problem. How you doing, sir? Oh, I'll just take this. Well, ma'am, you ride the Western Pacific often? Is this your first trip out west? You look like you've done quite a bit of traveling to be so young.
Well, thank you. But no, this is not my first trip to the Pacific. As a teenager, I traveled all over the world with my parents. I lived in Paris for 2 years and went to the University of Liverpool. But then, in the middle of my junior year, we came back to the States and I graduated from Stanford University.
Wow, you've been everywhere. What kind of work do you do?
I'm in advertising and marketing.
Advertising. Don't know much about advertising. Something that make me want to be who I ain't and buy stuff I don't need. It is truly my pleasure to serve you. Where's a pretty little filly like you heading for the holidays?
Oh, I'm going to see my parents for the holidays. Would you believe that 2 years ago they left New York and bought a house in Malibu?
That's amazing.
This will be my first time seeing their new home.
Excuse me, Porter, may I have a refill?
Oh, absolutely, sir. We'll get that wrapped for you. Not a problem. Let's see what's in drinking. Okay. There you go, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Here you go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very kindly. And for you, man, what can I do for you? Can I get you anything?
No, thank you.
So, where do you live at now?
Oh, I'm in St. Paul. Excuse me, Porter. What time will they be serving dinner in the dining car?
Promptly at 7:30, ma'am. And I overheard the chef saying that they were paying turkey, stuffing, and giblet gravy.
Sounds delicious. You know, ma'am, I hate to eat alone. Would you mind some company for dinner?
Why not? 7:30 in the dining car, then.
Until then, can I get you anything? Anything at all?
A fresh ashtray, perhaps, and a help you.
Oh, sure, sir. I have those things for you. Lickety split. Not a problem at all. Oh, yeah. Here you go. Right there. And just get up, sir. Yeah.
Where's the...
Sit right back there. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Where's the other fellow who was here last night?
Oh, he thinks it's on his break. He should be back in a little while. Return to the smoking car.
He seemed like a very polite fellow. Have you walked together very long?
Oh, yeah. I guess I signed on about a year ago, and since then I've gotten to know Dixon. He's a brilliant man, very, very well educated. You know, he probably should be in Washington or something, but he says he gets the chance to help people a lot here on the smoking car.
You like working here?
Oh, me, I'm just a regular kind of guy. I haven't studied overseas or traveled around the world, and I'm lucky to have this job.
And this fellow is a learned man.
Yeah, quite a character. Hey, Dixon, you back from break?
Yes, I am.
All right. Truly my pleasure to serve you, ma'am. Absolutely. Sir? Thank you, sir. Later, Dix.
See you later, Skip.
Yes, I actually I'd love to have a minute with you.
This really is very good wine.
There you go. Good afternoon, sir. I hope you had a pleasant and restful slumber. If you like, I can put in a good word with the cook and get you a late breakfast.
No, thank you. Look at his conduct. His gentle, unobtrusive manner, his solicitude for the women passengers, and all the while being affable and generous of spirit. Who is this man? Well, no matter. Yesterday, he defeated me. But today, I will let him know why my kind are the masters and his kind the servants. I've got a same face. Today, I will return and right this once and for all. Reading again, I see.
Yes, sir.
What is it this time?
I was reading about the ancient Druids. The custom of these ancient tribal Britons were divided into various classes. The common people were the peasants and the artisans. Above that were the warrior classes and the ruling classes of the kings and chieftains and such. But above that was another group of people. The ancient Druids studied for nearly 20 years before they were considered capable of their teachings and practices. They were the judges, mages, scholars, and diviners, all with supposed incredible abilities. Shape-shifting, levitation, prophecy, weather control, and an invaluable connection to nature.
Well, that is another way why it's superior to the blacks.
They were the most eloquent speakers, poets, lyricists. It's been reported that they could see all of reality clearly, past, present, and future, no matter the situation. Yet, they still participated in the shameful act of human sacrifices.
Well, the Africans shrink heads as human sacrifice.
Once in Damascus, I saw a Syrian carrying a great many chickens to market, with their legs tied together and heads hanging down.
Well, in the South, Negroes and pagans go together like they were made for each other.
In the ruins of Greece, Pompeii, the Colosseum, Guatemala, in the remains of the cliff dwellers in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah stand great historical monuments to the achievements of antiquity as being equal to or quite preeminent to modern man.
The Negro had no such monuments to his credit.
Oh? What of Nubia? Libya, the Sphinx, or Zimbabwe, and the other ruined cities at Mashan. I remember my visit to Ethiopia and the ruins at Meroe.
Well, both the Indian and the Negro have experienced the domination of the white man. And the Indian showed a superior mentality to the Negro. The Indian resisted slavery while the Negro accepted it. My great-grandma was a Cherokee princess, and I'm proud of it. The Indian is superior to the Negro.
He wants me to argue the color question, doesn't he? All right, I will. But don't blame me if I give it to him worse than I did last night. The Indian was enslaved successively by the Spanish, French, the English, and the Portuguese. There were Indian slaves from Canada to Florida. The decline of Indian slavery was due chiefly to it being an economic failure. The Indian couldn't withstand the hardships nor the disease, whiskey, or drugs of the white man. The Negro was introduced and supplanted both the Indian and the poor white as a worker. A white slave was considered more valuable than an Indian, and a Negro more than either. The Negro was reckoned to be the equivalent of 5 or 6 Indians, and sometimes brought a price 9 times as high. I've seen a great deal of Indian life, primarily in Montana, Nevada, and Arizona, and the Canadian Northwest. Very frankly, I find it very much below the standard of the Negro. Today, the Indian in the eastern states and the southern states, most notably Oklahoma, are more Negro than anything else.
But even in the black man's home.
Excuse me, Porter. Would you see that this is forwarded at the next stop?
Yes, ma'am. First thing.
But even in the black man's home, the white man is master. Look at how a handful of whites will hold down millions of all the other races. Look at India. Look at India. A handful of Anglo-Saxons holding in subjugation more than 4 million natives. Look at how the white man has conquered or overrun every other country on the globe. But my race rules Europe, the greater part of Africa, most of the Far East, all of Australia, all the New World. In short, my race is the master of the planet. That the world is a far better, healthier, cleaner place to live in is due entirely to the touch of the white man.
Yes, but like the cow who gives the pail of milk and then kicks it over, the white race is doing its best to destroy all of civilization. I mean, just think. 2 world wars in a quarter of a century. It's a record to contemplate.
I thought I had it.
I will admit that the Caucasian race is the most advanced industrial. They have been. They are the pioneering group in nearly all lines, and will probably remain so for quite some time. But even this energy is conquered by the climate and certain other conditions which have retarded the growth of other people. I've seen white men in the tropics sink so low as to be the object of disgust to the lowest of the natives. This is due, no doubt, to the large amounts of whiskey they swill to drown out the monotony of tropical life. The white immigrant to the tropics, he loses energy, while the Negro in the northern latitude improves in energy and acquisitiveness. The Negro in, say, New York State is much more superior to the white native of the tropics and most of our southern states.
But Negroes have been living in northern latitudes for more than 300 years. And in all that time, they've not produced one single genius. Not one man of great international fame. Well, a lot of blacks have acquired pseudo fame from their white pamperers or the outrageous exaggerations of their own race. But if they had been white men, they'd have passed unnoticed in the crowd.
It's true that the Negro has been living in the northern latitudes for some time, but under what debased conditions? There have been several Negroes who have reached national and international distinction regardless of color. One of the most remarkable figures the South has produced since Lincoln is Booker T. Washington. In my opinion, He and Frederick Douglass are the two most remarkable figures the United States has ever produced. Both came from a lower depth than Lincoln, and even when they achieved a measure of fame, were still open to the insults and attacks of the lowest of the whites. There have been many other Negroes such as Carver, Carter G. Woodson, C.C. Spaulding, William Pickens, Paul Robeson, Jesse Owens, Joe Louis, all who measure up to national and international standards.
But the ability of these men is due to the Caucasian blood in their veins.
This can no doubt be due to lack of accomplishment because the Indian descent that so many whites will boast of, we've done far more than them. The Negro thinks pretty much in the same channels, has pretty much the same habits and mannerisms, class for class, as the whites, but the general attitude is to think of him as though he just arrived from Africa. Baron Estor de Ali of the French Senate said it right when he said, "The Negro is a freed man, but not a citizen."
But the South treats the Negro better than the North. Look at what you see when you're on a train going across the Mason-Dixon line going north. All of the labor that is done by black men in the South is done by whites. In the South, we have more locomotive engineers and brakemen and mechanics than you have in the North. All the union labor like that is barred to them. All the factories in the South, you find ready employment there. They can't get into factories in the North, and then all the unskilled labor is given to them. The janitors and the porters and the waiters and all that labor in the North is being done by white foreigners. You can't tell me that the North is a better place for your people than the South.
Well, I fear I cannot agree with you, sir. The Negro illiteracy rate is 4.7% in the North. It's 19.7% in the South. I will admit that the Southerner is more sympathetic. As someone said, the South likes the Negro as an individual, but detests him as a race, while the North likes him as a race, but detests him as an individual.
I never heard it put like that before. But you will admit that the Negro can always find a friend in the Southern white man. The Southern white man knows his failings and makes his allowance for him.
The Indian, with the better opportunities afforded him, wilts under the rigors of civilization. If the theory of the survival of the fittest is a test of virility, then the Negro stands among the best. Indeed, that fortitude which brought him through 250 years of cruelty unparalleled in medieval or modern history, that tenacity which makes him hold on when the Indian quits, that spirit of independence which keeps his poorhouse population lower than that of the Caucasian, who with all his thousands of superior chances, that buoyancy that makes him smile in the midst of persecution, would justify my saying that he is the fittest of the fit.
This lecturing, these presumptions on the part of a Negro is more than I can stand. No, I cannot run away and leave him the master of the field. And besides, I was the one that started the discussion. At no time has this man ever been disrespectful. Indeed, I feel a kind of frank fascination for his manner and his affability. And at no time has he ever been disrespectful to me in anything he said. And I know what this Negro is saying is the truth. Why should I be angry at hearing the truth? In his analysis, the points between fact and policy come across more and more concretely, and the more clearly I see it, the less I like my stand.
Good evening.
Pleasant day, sir.
Oh, this is good enough for me. I hope I'm not interfering with your conversation.
Not at all. Don't let him interrupt you.
As I was going to say, sir, do not infer from my remarks that Negroes are generally, either actively or passively, hankering after social intermingling with the whites. Negroes are generally welcome at radical balls. However, few will attend when personally invited or given complimentary tickets. Now, at a recent socialist ball in New York City, there were only 7 Negroes in attendance. The same was largely true of the communist ball. As I said, Negroes are the original stand-patters. Negroes have their own societies. They do not ask for social intermingling. All they want is open competition in the labor market. Indeed, most Negro families have all the charm and respectability of the best white families. My protest is that the most refined Negro has all the herd respectability of the finest of white society.
But they are not white.
They're white in everything but color. I know Negroes who possess as high ideals as any white person I know, but the average white knows as much of this home life as they do of the fourth dimension. Most meet only uneducated Negroes, while others associate with a lower class of colored women and judge all of us by that type. Negroes have their own societies.
Well, that's what I say too. I stand for fair play to all.
And so do you think that Negroes should be allowed at white dinner parties and social occasions and white dances where young people will meet each other?
If such people are courteous enough for that, why certainly. They mix in Europe among the same white race. If each person in question can learn something ennobling from the other, and ennobling influences have no color. When a Caucasian reads Terence, Aesop, Pushkin, Dumas, Georgie Douglas Johnson, or Jesse Fassant, or admires the painting of a Harper, Tanner, Scott, listens to the music of Coleridge Taylor, Rosamond Johnson, Det, or Berlot, they associate, for lack of a better name, we'll call it black thought. If they associate with the works of the authors, why not the authors themselves?
Because social intermixing will lead to intermarriage. And the Anglo-Saxon will not tolerate the mongrelizing of his race. Better 1,000 times that our race should be wiped out first. Whatever you say, you cannot say that the Caucasian does not protect his women. It must be done, even if we have to wipe out all the other races to do it.
While I stand for fair play to the black men, I am strongly opposed to intermarrying.
Okay.
Oh, the Negro is a far less developed race. It took the white man thousands of years to get to his present height, and until the Negro reaches that height, the white man has everything to lose and nothing to gain by amalgamation. Another great objection to the marrying of a black man to a white woman is that he cannot provide for her as a white man could, and she must suffer.
There is a tendency among people otherwise calm to get excited when discussing this phase of the color situation. No amount of loud talk or agitation will make it go away, since it's been with us for quite some time. So why not look at it calmly then? Now, the way I see this, gentlemen, is that this matter of black and white mixing and of marriages resolves itself into 7 principal points. 1 against, 4 for the question resolving itself, and 2 in favor. Now, the 1 point against is that such unions are contrary to law in 29 states, and, let us admit, opposed by public opinion in all the others.
Public opinion. There, you've said it. The voice of the people is the voice of God.
Very true, sir. The voice of the people is like the voice of God. But only when, like the voice of God, it speaks the truth. Now, let us look at these other examples. First, we'll go to the Bible. Oh, welcome, madam.
You boys don't mind if I join you, do you?
Well, go on. Name your arguments in favor of intermarrying. You've got to hear this.
Well, as I said, let us look to the Bible. Is such a marriage wrong theologically? Evidently not. For the Bible says that God struck Miriam with leprosy for objecting to Moses' Ethiopian wife. Of course, Joseph and Solomon each had Egyptian wives. Moses and Solomon wore Negroes. Still, there is a strong feeling of intermarriage among certain African tribes. Second, is it wrong biologically? It is possible to produce healthy offspring by the union of the most cultured and the lowest of the primitives. Some of the finest types mentally and physically have been produced by crossing dissimilar races. Coleridge Taylor, one of England's greatest musicians, General Dumas, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington. Third, is it wrong ethically? Quite the contrary. Our laws forbid sexual immorality. Now here's where the law is in conflict with itself. Bryce says in his essay, The American Commonwealth, that this is one of the least defensible of all laws. Fourth, the right to choose one's mate is one of the most ancient, most sacred of individual rights. And when the state interferes, except in the case of the mentally unfit, it but adds humor to the witticism, this is a free country. Now, let us look to the two reasons in favor of intermarriage. First, it's beneficial sociologically. As the color of the mulatto is not only more pleasing to the white but to the black, the situation improves. Roosevelt said in an article on Brazil in the Outlook that a prominent Brazilian pointed out to him how the matter of color friction had been averted by Brazil's policy of race fusion. Whereas in the United States, color disagreements are more likely to increase. Second, and most important of all, the honor and dignity of the Republic demands a cessation of the dishonorable relations that have gone on for over 300 years between the white man and the colored man.
Amalgamation will lead to degeneracy. The example is that the mulatto who inherits the negative characteristics of both and the good traits of neither.
No, that's impossible. How can the mulatto inherit the bad qualities of both races? He is inferior only in longevity. I have seen aged white men and aged Negroes, but never an aged mulatto. How can the mulatto inherit the bad qualities of both races?
Mulattoes from a white fathering bear the characteristics of their Negro inferiority, whereas the bastard of a Negro and a white woman bears all of the characteristics of his inferior lineage. Everybody knows that.
Are you saying that it is half right for a white man to sire children from a black woman, but it's all wrong for a black man to sire children from a white woman?
I said he bears the negative traits of both and the good traits of neither, but his chances are better if it's the father that's white.
How can you make a claim like that? Men and women are biologically equal. It's class that separates them, not temperament. Now this is where the doctors disagree. They say the mulatto is the more vicious of the two races because he is not so passive under exploitation as a full-blooded Negro.
Von Lushkin says that we are absolutely ignorant about the moral and intellectual qualities of the half-caste. Roosevelt says there is nothing of the mongrel of the aspect of the Brazilian. Would you care to hear what Fanon has to say on the subject?
Go on.
Crossbreeding among the most differentiated races, far from resulting in sterility, adds to their fecundity. According to LaValliant, a Hottentot woman who generally has 3 or 4 children will have as many as 10 or 12 when united with a white man or a Negro. The crossing of Negroes with white women or white men with Negro women produces similar results. Crossbreeding has in no sense the sorry result of physical degeneracy, nor of bringing people to final ruin. Where did Tyler find the most beautiful women in the world? At Tristan da Cunha, among the descendants of the whites and the Negroes.
Tristan what?
Tristan da Cunha, a little island between the Cape and South America. He says that among the young girls were some with such entirely beautiful faces that I do not remember having seen anything so splendid. and yet I am familiar with all the strands of the earth. Ailey and its Malays, Havana and its Creoles, Tahiti and its nymphs, the United States and its most distinguished women. In the case of man, there is an inheritance of moral and intellectual qualities that follows no fixed and absolute rules. Under the influence of agencies of which we do not know the nature, the intellectual qualities often reached in the mixed progeny of whites and black a degree of superiority which cannot be explained in terms of either heredity, remote, or proximate. Some unknown force gives rise in them to an intelligence that is capable of developing to a pitch neither of the parents could reach. It is, in fact, common to find as the offspring of a white of very mediocre intelligence united with a negress of the lowest grade of culture an individual of considerable intellectual power.
But what about heredity? That most important of points to be considered in the crossing of animals, humans, or otherwise.
A most important question, sir, and one that has been sadly neglected. As noted, the welcome that was extended to all European immigrants, many of whom, such as the Germans, French, Scandinavian, and possibly the English, live below the economic level of the American Negro. The American Negro is more intelligent and has a better fed appearance than most of the immigrants one saw on Ellis Island or in the steerage of a transatlantic liner. This is indisputable. The Negro illiteracy rate was 1/3 less than that of their white counterpart in 1930 in New York City. And this was due, no doubt, to the large white foreign population.
Anyway, I still believe that everyone should marry his own color. It doesn't look good to see a mixed couple.
What would you say of a marriage between a full-blooded Negro and an octoroon who, by all appearances, was white?
That would be all right. They're both of the same race.
Okay. What would you say of a marriage of that same octoroon to a person white or believed to be white?
That would be wrong.
But didn't you just say that each should marry his own color? That black should marry black, brown, brown, whites, whites, and blondes, blondes?
It's not a matter of what looks good, but what is right or wrong. Intermarriage is nature and has been since man first fell in love. People have the right to choose who to marry. Not by man's law, but by God's law. After all, who can pick what the heart shall adore?
Now, most people, in speaking about the inherent dislike the races have for each other, forget that there's also an inherent attraction between them. Since so-called intermarrying is not the taking up of blacks or whites at random and marrying them off, should such persons be encouraged to live wedded or forced to live unwedded?
You say you believe in miscegenation? Tell me, would you have your daughter marry a Negro?
I told you before I am against intermarrying. I'd never have any of my children to marry anyone, black or white. I would leave them to choose their own partners. I should never exert any influence against anyone, no matter what race.
Man, you just don't get it. Love is not some orchestrated game or matrimonial chess match. Love is feelings of affection far beyond the ability of humans to comprehend. Love can either be felt, given, or refused. Never designed.
Well, there's one thing for sure that you advocates of miscegenation are not counting on. That is the inherent dislike between the races.
Inherent dislike between the races? Do you believe in the fatherhood of God? Well, do you?
Yes, of course.
Oh, then you would have us believe that the God who commanded us to love one another would create hatred in the hearts of one race for another?
Apparently. If our hatred is natural, then why must it be fed to keep it alive? The only reason it persists is because it is so profitable to certain newspapers, politicians, Ku Klux Klans, and all other exploiters of labor, white or black. It's also true that lustful white men want to keep Negro women at a place where it will be easy to get them.
You know, the white man has mixed with the black of his own volition more than any other human race. The exotic black is attracted to rather than repulsed by the white. I found that most of the women who visit colored clubs are white. And one of these clubs I went into, I asked where all the colored women were. And I told that the white men had appropriated them.
That's right. They want to keep Negro women where they can have them to themselves. But when it comes to the public eye, they claim to hate anything black, except voluptuousness.
Permit me. The keeper of one of these places told me that several porters had lost their wives by bringing them to live in that city, and that he wouldn't advise any colored man to bring his wife to live there. And one of these clubs that I visited, I saw 8 white women, 5 of whom were from the South. Now, I found this to be the same case in an ultra-dry and private colored club where the better class of white women visited. Similar conditions existed all over, well, throughout the larger western towns. And in most of those western towns, there are very few colored women, and the ones that are there are of a very low class and mostly have gone over to all the white men, being very scornful to black men. Who ordered any coal, they'll ask on the approach of a black man. Similar conditions exist all over the United States. I've noticed and seen houses of prostitution where all the occupants are black and the patrons are white. This being glaringly so in New Orleans and also in that part of Canada under American influence. In one large eastern town, I found a club run by a white man for porters where all the women in it were white. In Chicago, there are scores of resorts where Negro men can meet white women and white men black women. I found that the relations between black and white, whether it's in Boston or Seattle or San Francisco or New Orleans, is that of chronic immorality.
Well, one thing is for sure. Miscegenation will not affect the racial integrity of the Caucasian.
Why?
Because all mixed bloods are classified as Negroes. No blood flows from the black race into the white. And you all fail to calculate the influence that the Caucasian has over the contact between the two races.
Well, you know, this theory that abandoned white women love to marry black men, it's popular, but it's incorrect in most of the cases. Might not the reason that these women marry black men is because they find in the black men that which their own people refuse them, and that which makes them social outcast? Genuine human sympathy?
Well, I'll be in the dining car and leave you boys to your fun. Thank you for sharing your opinion with us. You're the only one around here with his head screwed on straight. And thank you for your kind and friendly service. You know, you could teach a lot to a whole lot of people around here who think they're better than everyone else. Gentlemen.
Sir, do you need a refill?
Well, George.
Afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, sir.
Everything all right?
Very well. We're having a spirited discussion.
Fantastic. Always good to see you, sir. Dixon,
Sir?
everything going well?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Could
Keep
you,
up the good work.
could you have Skip bring me some more towels, please?
I will have Skip bring you some more towels.
Thank you.
I'm going to the dining car.
Say hello to our erstwhile companion.
I will. Did I understand you to say that you've been to South Africa?
Yes, I was in South Africa for 8 months, traveling from Cape Town to the Ivory Coast.
South Africa reminds me so much of Argentina. The spring weather there is absolutely wonderful.
I prefer the shorter autumn.
You know, the treatment of blacks in the South is embarrassing. I'm a Southerner myself, but I am strongly opposed to the whites' treatment of the Negro. White men can never rise higher than the Negro. You know, whites and blacks in the South are like Siamese twins, so joined that one cannot harm the other without harming himself, or benefit the other without benefiting himself.
That's a very broad-minded point of view for a Southerner.
Well, I've found the truth is the only thing worth living for. I force my will to accustom itself to strange truths, to overcome prejudice. Most of our prominent leaders of thought are conspicuously weak-kneed in the matter of color.
Leaders, you say? Therein lies the problem. The masses pick their leaders according to their own light. Each one decides how he gets the most pleasure from giving up his money.
That's it. Money seems to run everything these days, I know. But if Christ is the heavenly example for men, then how few have approached that example? Well, there's no record of Christ having ever taken up a collection. Now, I make it a point never to give a cent to any leader who appeals to me on any ground other than justice for all. Every American citizen must be free to go anywhere and do anything that any other law-abiding citizen is free to do. That's my stand.
You asked for some towels, Dixon?
Yes, thank you.
All right. There you go.
Thank you.
You know, the United States, in its treatment of the Negro, ought to imitate the humble oyster, who, whenever he gets something under his shell, quietly turns it into a pearl. And I now know that there's no other race other than yours that has those qualities for human conversion into pearls as yours.
Thank you, sir. It's very kind of you.
Dinner's being served, so why don't you all? Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. There you go. Absolutely, sir. What's wrong with you, man? You can't talk to them white people like that. What are you, crazy?
No, not at all.
Man, you better just smile, keep this place clean, and give them what they want, man. They're gonna get you fired. You can't talk to them people like that, man. You can't talk to them people like that. What are you trying to do to them?
It's just that I don't fear them.
Fear them? Man, how much money you got?
$16?
$16, man. I've been getting paid all week, man. I got half that from that dude just walked out of here. Come on, man, let me teach you how to get some money, man. I don't know what I'm gonna do with you, man.
It's not about money,
Talking
man.
about books and stuff. You're crazy. It's crazy.
Another paper for you, sir. Negro burned by mob of cheering Texans. Thousands, including a young girl, see a black man burned alive at stake in public square. How could such a thing be possible in a country which more than any other on earth proclaims its civilization? When before in history has a human race of another country been dismembered and burnt alive? Every other form of atrocity inflicted upon them without just cause. If white men were burned alive for rape and kidnapping and murder, how many do you think would be burned alive daily in America? We've had so much lynching that it seems like it's become an American institution. No, it seems that white neighbors don't want to tell on one another. No, the lynching will stop when justice opens her eyes and views the black man as a human. You probably recall the case of the arch murderer, Williams, on the Georgia death row farm for the proven murder of 11 Negroes. It was not until there was national and international attention to the case that he was even tried and given a life sentence. Now, had a Negro merely wounded a white person, one can only imagine what would have happened to him. Yeah, but were whites punished for Negroes, it's not too much to say that in states like Mississippi, jail life would be the normal life.
Jason, I wondered, have you ever thought of leaving the U.S.?
I have thought of going to Brazil, but on second thought, I decided to remain here. I think sometimes I experience too much of the acid of color prejudice to keep my temper sweet. This is my country, mine as much as any other Americans. My great-great-grandfather died at the Battle of Rhode Island to win its freedom. My great-grandfather fought at Lake Erie to preserve its independence. My grandfather fought at Shiloh to preserve its unity. I'm an American. No one shall make me run. There are Negroes in Washington, D.C. who have federal positions. Some of these are very well-paid positions. But since prejudice is an enemy that doesn't like open competition, it's sometimes by the merest chance that they get these well-merited positions.
Well, what do you think of that?
I don't think it ought to differ from that of any other color of mankind. I believe that every human being, whether man or woman, should be able to develop their powers to the fullest ability in their own way. Any agency who denies that is pernicious to the extreme. What good does it do the state that a group of its citizens are forcibly dwarfed to remain as laborers? In the reign of Henry VIII, the lower classes were not permitted to read the Bible, especially the New Testament. How do we view that today? Yet here we are 500 years later, and a certain group of men are advocating an analogous thing as the non-education of a certain group of its citizens.
So, you say more than a justice.
Since industry is the means of production, the race will acquire a certain amount of wealth and independence. And if the Negro can't be employed by whites, he has to create his own work. If it's the policy of subservience, then no, I don't agree with it. But if it's the policy of gaining education and becoming skilled in a trade where you can make your own living, yes, I agree with you.
But some say he supported conformity to the white idea, that he should have taken a stronger stance in defense of your people.
There are some who take offense to the title that he was given, leader of the Negro race. It's true that he did not have the warrior spirit, if you will, or an assertive spirit, say a Patrick Henry or George Washington, Frederick Douglass. But had he not had that subservient manner that he had, we would not have a Tuskegee or schools like Tuskegee, which are very much needed. With schools that produce masters instead of servants.
Some people object that he made a lot of money.
Well, I sincerely hope he did. I know of no other American who deserves it more. There are very few citizens, black or white, who did as much as he did. I think many people would be wise to emulate his acts.
What do you think of the press and the Negro?
The press. I think the large dailies, they've changed somewhat. In the 1920s, race riots were caused by the inflammation of these tabloids. But since then, more and more...
Senator, as we almost approach Los Angeles, you're in cabin 132, I believe. I need to check something out with you. One moment, please.
Certainly.
Thank you, Senator. The next stop will be the last stop. We'll be arriving in Los Angeles in approximately 15 minutes. Please exit the car on the right.
All right, right this way, ma'am. Come on, yeah. I'll take good care of you. Absolutely. Come on, sir. Oh, yeah. It was wonderful having you. It's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dixon, would you have a seat, please? I want to thank you for telling the other side of the story, for opening my eyes to a great injustice being done to a large segment of the American people. I always prided myself on my broad humanity, and I now see how narrow it was. But I'm going to do all I can to disseminate the truth, as you have so competently told it. All real Americans should do their utmost to end this great evil. Yesterday, you spoke of a black actor who was high honors, a Shakespearean actor. What was his name?
Ira Aldridge.
Ira Aldridge. The connection is this. I've left papers with the conductor to contact me. For I have interest in a large motion picture studio. And what we will endeavor to do is to use Negro stories as call forth the best qualities of your people in drama, and to disseminate the truth as you told it in song and story and verse, and to let people know the black man. It's more that they don't know the black man that seems to be the division between the two races. Yeah. We have done movies of the Count of Monte Cristo, the Three Musketeers, but how many people know that the author of those wonderful stories was a Negro? Why not a movie on the life of Dumas himself? We've done Zola and others. In the meantime, I shall do all I can to make America a real republic. Thank you.
There's very good reason for hope, sir. I'm of the firm belief that most whites are not so much against the Negro as that they don't know him. They are, as the French would say, plus blanc que machette. Color prejudice is only a result of ignorant teaching. The white American who hates Negroes, had he been born in Europe and remained there, would have had the same hatred or phobia against Jews, Englishmen, Germans, Frenchmen, or other whites. A century ago, both New York and Massachusetts had Jim Crow cars. Today, the Jim Crow cars are gone, and both of those states have laws penalizing discrimination. In the South, chattel slavery has disappeared. Lynching is becoming extinct. There is hope that one day the full light of justice will dawn even on the South, if those of us who have the vision will work tirelessly and courteously towards that end. Goodbye, sir, and good fortune.
Jagged jigsaw pieces tossed about the room. I saw my grandma sweeping with her old straw broom. But she didn't know what she was doing. She could hardly understand that she was really sweeping up pieces of a man.